The thousands of stars you see when you look up at the night sky, every one of them living in between two collapses. An initial collapse of a dark stellar gas cloud that formed the star, and a final collapse of a luminous star on the way to its ultimate fate.
Hey everyone, it's Stacy. Here in Vegas. It's March 1st, 10:45 p.m. here on a Thursday night. And I spent the entire day listening to and taking notes of the interview by Redoubt News with Gary Hunt, and the first audio of the OMD board that Gary Hunt and Ryan Payne was a part of, and that there was a confidential informant that was selected for the board. He was going by the name of, I think it was Dickerson, or I don't know. But anywho, for those of us that have read the 91-page legal summary, or the summary that was submitted in the sentencing phase of Ryan Payne's case, for those of us that have taken the time to read the documents, there were some questions. Apparently, many individuals have jumped to the conclusion that Gary Hunt is also an informant, which I don't know if he is or isn't, but I can tell you one thing. The 91-page summary, I had a few questions related to that summary. But initially, because of my experience here behind the scenes, keeping an eye on the Nevada case, I know that the government has a tendency to splice and dice information and slip it into reports as if it's somehow true, okay? So this is something that I had come to the conclusion of just by reading the legal summary, okay? It would have been easy for the prosecution to provide the audio recordings to the court, but they didn't do that. They submitted a summary of the reports, as if we're supposed to believe that everything in the summary is true. You don't know. Okay, the summary is what they call circumstantial evidence. Okay, the recordings are material information. They are facts. This summary is circumstantial. It's based on someone's opinion. And like I said, the information is usually sliced and diced to say what they want it to say to justify prosecuting Ryan Payne or holding him, for 2 years or whatever. So I have an issue for a couple of reasons in the sentencing hearing of Ryan Payne, because one, the summary was used by the judge during that hearing, but the defense has not had the opportunity to see if the summary is actually factual or opinionated, okay? Secondly, the summary indicates that there was a search warrant from a Nevada court, okay? It says right here, the search warrant was obtained in the District of Nevada. Well, Dropbox Incorporated is a privately owned company out of San Francisco, California. So a question I have is, how can a Nevada search warrant be executed on a California company? Well, it can't. It has no force or effect according to a 2009 ruling of State versus Jacobs, that it says Ohio courts lack the authority to issue a search warrant to be carried out in another state As to the latter reason, the court held that this was a fundamental violation of the Constitution and Ohio law. Specifically, the court states that Justice Holmes said in a different context in Silverthorne Lumber Company versus United States in a 1920 case that a line must be drawn somewhere to prevent the Fourth Amendment guarantee against unreasonable search and seizures from becoming no more than a form of words. Crossing state lines by allowing Ohio court to determine when California citizens and property are subject to search and seizure crosses this constitutional line. In Hardy and Wilmoth, at least the court that issued the warrant, the court had authority to issue it, and the law enforcement officers were all in Ohio, albeit in different legislative created venues, and therefore their actions were subject to Ohio law. Allowing one state's court to determine when property, residence, and residences of another state may be subject to search and seizure would trample the sovereignty of states to determine the procedures by which a warrant may be issued and executed, and their courts to determine the consequences of a failure to follow those laws. Okay? So the warrant to obtain the recordings in Gary Hunt's Dropbox was unlawful, according to Supreme Court rulings. Okay? Secondly, I would say this is why the legal summary was only used in sentencing pain and not brought up in the court. Defense attorneys didn't question the legality or validity of the information in the summary that Judge Anna Brown was using to determine Payne's sentencing, without anyone having to prove the summary was accurate and truthful, or if the warrants were lawfully obtained. This judge used it in his hearing summary. I would say that gives Ryan Payne the right to appeal his sentence. Okay, because this information was obtained unlawfully. Okay, you can't have a Nevada court obtain and enforce a court order in the state of California. Okay, that's according to Supreme Court rulings. Okay, so I took the summary, the information in the summary. I automatically assumed it to be non-factual, but just an opinion of whoever wrote the summary. Okay, that's what I did. But here's the problem. So Sherry Duvall from Redoubt News, she did an interview with Gary Hunt. Okay, the notes that I had were 2 pages. Let's see, 1, 2, 2.5 pages from the summary. Okay, those are notes I had, my legal research. It took 2.5 pages. The interview Sherry Duvall did with Gary Hunt has taken up, there's a half, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, 10.5, 11.5, 12, 13, 14, 15, 15. Well, that's a half page. So just say 15 pages. I have 15 pages of notes from the interview that she did and research I have done, okay, concerning that interview. Now, I have gone to listen to Gary Hunt's first recording of the first release of a recording of the meeting of his board members of the OMD, okay, which has led to half a page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7.5 pages so far. I am only 23 minutes into that first recording, guys. Let me show you right here. 23 minutes and 4 seconds into that recording. And I have calculated, I have 31 unanswered questions. Okay? In the interview that Sherry Duvall did, I ended up with 12, 15, 16. Oops, somewhere it skipped. 17 questions I ended up with. Okay? So I didn't have any questions I couldn't answer from the summary that was filed in the court. The interview, listening to the interview, gave me 17 unanswered questions. Then listening to 23 minutes of the audio recording from the OMD's meeting has given me an additional 31 unanswered questions. Okay? Now, I have these questions, I put them in here, and as I go through here, I'm hoping that they will be answered. But of these 17 questions I had from Sherry Duvall's interview, I only received one answer from the actual interview. The other 16 went unanswered. So there's 16 unanswered questions I have about the interview she gave. Okay, and so far, 23 minutes into the video, it is a hour and 22-minute video. I have managed to come up with 31 unanswered questions, and I'm hoping the remainder of this video will help address some of these questions that I have. But the main issue I am seeing right now is the structure of this board and how it was created. Okay, it's what I have a real issue with. The lack of security of its documents and recordings. There is just so many issues with the structure and the procedures and policies of this organization that it was only a matter of time that at least one of its members would be harmed in some way, if not more. Okay? What I find ironic is the fact that Gary Hunt did not face any charges for, like he said, for the call out that he did. Okay? He said that in his video. He did a call out, but it was less than 24 hours long. So he's assuming that's why, he wasn't prosecuted. But I can tell you one thing. Not only could the call out be construed as, a reason to indict him, it was also contrary to the board's policies, which says that if the board determines that a situation warrants a call to action, then word would be sent to supporters and volunteers. But at this point, the board could not be formed. Dickerson was an informant. Ryan Payne had been arrested. John Ritzheimer was under threat of arrest. So the only board member I see here is Tim, and I believe, according to the summary that was filed with the court, he resigned. So the only actual board member left was Gary Hunt. He couldn't form a quorum with his other board members. He couldn't get a hold of them. So he called out, he made the decision for a call out without the majority of consent from his board members. So I believe that behavior is also questionable, what he did do. It may not be deemed as illegal, but it certainly falls outside the scope of the authority of his position as a board member. Okay? So there's many issues with the creation of this, just of this organization, just going by the information that Gary Hunt has provided, and much information that needs to be provided that hasn't been provided to us. So like I said, I am hoping that I get many of these questions answered by listening to the rest of this video, and I encourage everyone else to go over to Redoubt News YouTube page and listen to the first OMD, first audio recording, and then the Gary Hunt interview that she did prior to the release of that recording, and make your own judgments, write down your own questions that you have and your own determinations, because I'm going to be putting these videos out discussing this information and asking the hard questions. I know that Sherry did a good job with some of the questions that she answered. Other questions she asked I don't think were really necessary or pertinent to Gary Hunt. So But, I appreciate her putting out this information and doing the interview. But I can tell you, as more information is being produced by Gary, I think it's drawing more questions about his integrity and the principles in which he chooses to operate. So, you guys stay tuned. Keep an eye on my YouTube page to get the latest updates on